Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the McBiffle Play Network. This is Dr. Omnibus. Over the past few months, you've seen me take on a couple different doctor roles. You've seen me as an orthopedist or a chiropractor, relaxing the spine of an omnibus. You've seen me as a podiatrist, creating a boot to prevent block sag in a larger omnibus. You've seen me do reconstructive surgery on an oversized hardcover that had binding damage, and you've seen me operate as a geneticist, creating my own custom bound hardcovers from the DNA of which would just be comic books. Today I will be putting on a different hat, that of a psychologist, so I thought that it would be best to film from the couch here. And today we're going to talk about how comic books benefit people. There are all sorts of ways that different people are affected in different ways by comic books, and I'd like to discuss some of those. So over the years in my collecting, I grew an affinity for public service announcement comics, and I collect them specifically. These are usually comics that are co-published between Marvel and or DC with a company that has nothing to do with comic books at all. So I'm going to show you a few of those before we get into some of the more specific ways that people can be helped with comic books. So the first one that I'll show you is one that is near and dear. It's a book that I buy every time I see it, and I've never had to pay more than $1 for one. It's Spider-Man, Storm, and Power Man, Battle Smokescreen. This is the first printing of the book. I don't remember what year it was. Then here's 2 copies of the second printing of it, which was in the early 90s. And then sometime in the early 2000s or late 90s, they did a third printing, I believe, and they changed up the cover. The story is the same in all of them. They may have redone the interior art on this one as well, I don't remember. But anyway, it's just a anti-smoking campaign book talking about the hazards of smoking. Yeah, they redid the story in this one, so I actually haven't read this one. I did not realize that. But it looks like it's pretty much the same story. A young track star starts smoking, and it impacts his performance, as well as many other aspects of his life. And we've got this one, Wolverine Global Jeopardy, which is co-published with the World Wildlife Fund. It's just a ethical treatment of animals story. Captain America versus the Asthma Monster. This one talks a little bit about asthma and what to do if someone's having an asthma attack and stuff like that. And this is actually the first comic or first item that I ever bought on kidferlife.com, who is recently a sponsor of Make Comic Book Collecting Fun Again. Run by Carrie Valerie, who's a super guy. Spider-Man 27. It's called Something About a Gun. It talks about hazards of keeping guns in the house, and actually this goes over a lot of different things. It talks about mental health, school violence, bullying, stuff like that. It's a pretty interesting issue. This one New Avengers, an Army of One, is Marvel salutes the real heroes, the men and women of the U.S. military. It's just a story about how the superheroes of the Marvel universe look up to the people in the armed forces. Something quite a bit more recent is Leap. This was written by Corey Siegel Oliver, and he ran this on Kickstarter about a year ago, and it deals with suicide. It's a pretty decent story, with really cool artwork, and I'm led to believe that maybe he's working on issue 2 right now. So keep an eye out for that Kickstarter. Heroes for Hope, X-Men, and I'm going to do this one at the same time, is Heroes Against Hunger. So DC and Marvel both put out a book for which the funds, or a certain amount of the proceeds, let's see, for DC all proceeds go to relieve hunger in Africa, and same thing with Marvel. So, and I love these books. Every 2 pages, it changes the writer, penciler, and inker. So just about everyone that was in the bullpen at the time that these were published worked on these books. So I get them signed by, whenever I'm getting a book signed, it's usually one of these. They say, oh, you know, almost everyone's in here. So this one's got 4 signatures on the cover, might have a couple inside as well. And this one has 2 on the inside. I decided not to get any cover signatures on this one. Superman for Earth is a sustainability PSA. The new Teen Titans, I just call it the drug issue. This one was co-published by Keebler. Obviously they have nothing to do with comic books or drugs, but they had something to do with the creation of this comic book. And obviously it's a anti-drug campaign book. This one is not exactly a PSA comic, but it was published in cooperation with UNICEF, and in it, Daredevil is charged, or Matt Murdock, I should say, is charged with the task of defending Venom at his trial. And that rubs Spider-Man the wrong way. And it just goes a little bit into civic responsibility and Fifth Amendment type of rights, stuff like that. So as a self-proclaimed patriot, I appreciate that type of message. Pizza Hut and Marvel worked together on this one called Real Heroes, in which a few Marvel characters essentially battle prejudice, which is said to be the most ancient menace of all time. Marvel Comics and the Electric Company, Spidey Super Stories. This is a pro-literacy, or something to help kids learn to read, essentially. None of the stories actually have much of a message to that effect, but it's an easy reader comic book. And I learned a little something new about this today. DC and Radio Shack worked together on pretty much this comic book, which is just an advertisement for Radio Shack. And some kids use a computer to help overcome the adversity in this comic. And I accidentally bought this one, not knowing if I had this or not. And when I bought it, I was a little disappointed. I was like, oh, I did already have it. But I was flipping through them today and found out these are actually 2 different stories. But they're both Radio Shack, DC, and the TRS-80 computer. So it's just a big advertisement for Radio Shack. Okay, so that's all the single issues I have. Except for, so I'm an alcoholic, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. But so this issue, Iron Man 128 holds a special place in my heart. In this issue, Iron Man faces his alcohol problem, and or comes to realize that he has one at least. He overcomes it very quickly, which is not the same story most alcoholics experience, but it's a cool little book for an alcoholic to have, in my opinion. And I got this signed by Bob Layton, and the authorized witness who witnessed the signature accidentally sent it for grading, even though I didn't care to have it graded. So I ended up getting it slabbed and couldn't bring myself to crack it open. So I bought the trade paperback, which contains that story. And so that was signed by Bob Layton. And I went ahead and got Mr. Layton to sign my trade paperback as well. And I had him draw a triangle inside of a circle, which is something that I won't talk specifically about. And he wrote one day at a time in there for me. And lastly, we've got The Amazing Spider-Man Fights Substance Abuse. There's a good handful of issues in here, all of which deal with substance abuse, as you would guess by the title, including Amazing Spider-Man 96 through 98, in which Harry Osborn becomes addicted to some sort of pill or something like that. It also contains that first book that I showed you, the Spider-Man Storm and Power Man book, and a bunch of other issues, which are very interesting. I read all these yesterday, and I put all these things in here thinking I was going to talk about it, but I'm not going to. All right, so as I mentioned, I am an alcoholic, and collecting has helped me over the past 7 years since I quit drinking. It's said that addiction has two major components. One is an obsessive desire, and the other is a compulsion to take that first drink. For alcoholics, that's what it is. And so I've always related that with obsessive compulsive disorder. Collecting provides me a great outlet that doesn't hurt anyone to exercise both of those defects. I can obsess over getting the full runs or just collecting in general, and I compulsively buy comic books, which in itself is not necessarily a healthy thing to do, but it's not as bad as the behaviors that I was exhibiting in the worst parts of my alcoholism. And it also helps me with escapism. As many alcoholics will tell you, there are times where we suffer from depression, just like any other person. And sometimes I just need a break from the world, and I can get that break in comic books. And that is a theme, that escapism is a theme throughout many of the benefits that I'll discuss here. Like PTSD. There's a member of Make Comic Book Collecting Fun Again. I don't know how to say his last name, but it's Louis Goebel. And he runs an organization called Vets Trade, where he takes comic books and he sends them to veterans who have come home and are suffering from PTSD or any other issue. And so he accepts donations of comic books that can be sent to these veterans, and any that maybe these veterans don't want or anything like that, he then sells and then uses that money to buy comic books to send to veterans. And I will put a link to his Facebook page in the comments on this video. Comic books for kids. Most of us have probably heard of them. They send comic books to hospitals across the country to help children with long-term illnesses keep their mind off of their symptoms and treatments. I will put a link to their website in the comments as well. Something I learned about recently was the Comic Book Education Foundation. They promote literacy through comic books. And they have a program where if a school signs up to receive their services, then the children at that school can each get a subscription, can each get 5 subscriptions to a comic book. And the comics will be delivered directly to the school. I'm sure each school does something different as to how they deliver them to the children. They probably get together and do some group activities and stuff like that. But anyway, this organization sends comic books to schools for children to help them learn to read. And they have a very impressive mission statement on their website, which I will link in the comments. There is another literacy-based foundation called Comics for Kids, Inc. They accept donations of comic books and give them to children. I'm not sure that there are any qualifying standards, but to help children learn to read. And one other benefit I see the comic books could have in society is not something that I have personal experience with, but some children grow up without positive role models in their life. And there are a lot of really great role models in comic books. As I film this right now, I'm looking at a picture of Captain America, and I think, if there was any superhero that I would want my son to try to be like, if I weren't around to teach him things, I would love for him to idolize Captain America. And so some kids just don't have that kind of role model in their life to teach them right from wrong, and for whatever reason. And perhaps they can find that role model in comic books. That is all I've got lined up tonight. I know that a lot of other people may have personal stories about how comic books have impacted their lives in a positive way. I would love to hear about them. Feel free to drop a comment letting me know about it, or shoot me a message if you find me on Facebook. And if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the MCBCFA Play Network, and I will see you next time.